What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan Thomas, and you are listening to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast live on Spreaker.com and YouTube. Thank you all for joining me. Just coming back from the short break on to part 2. Just recapped the main event from last night's UFC 214, and now I'm about to recap the action from the UFC co-main event, which had the UFC welterweight title on the line. The welterweight champion Tyron Woodley put his belt on the line against longtime submission ace Demian Maia. And to say the least, it was an uneventful fight. And this was probably the fight, obviously, that I was least excited to talk about. But as always, sometimes when you are least excited, there is the most to say. And that will be the case in this edition of the Thomas Take. So, Tyron Woodley and Demian Maia, interesting matchup going in. Woodley, the stronger fighter, the power puncher. Maia, the more technical fighter, the jiu-jitsu guy, the guy that can really ragdoll anyone if you let him. So Maia's game plan going in, I'm going to look to take Woodley down. Woodley's game plan going in, I'm going to look to avoid being on the ground or taken down at all costs versus Demian Maia. And boy, did Woodley live up to that expectation of avoiding the takedown at all costs. I think Maia was 0 for 18 in this fight. But one aspect of the fight that I noticed throughout was the fact that Tyron Woodley was soaking wet. In between rounds, his corner, like it or not, Tyron Woodley fans, like it or not, were dousing him in water without wiping him off. Without wiping him off. You put ice on a fighter's back to cool him off. You put ice on a fighter's chest to cool him off. You put ice on a fighter's legs to cool him off. And then you wipe him off. Woodley was not wiped off, and his trunks, which were already short to begin with, were rolled up. Two things I noticed. Now, I'm not trying to say that Tyron Woodley's a cheat and a fraud, but what I am trying to say is what I noticed throughout the fight. Two things I noticed that I think really helped contribute to the Woodley victory. And Maia even said himself, he was very slippery. He was soaking wet with sweat and water that was applied to his body throughout the course of the 5 rounds. This fight broke the UFC record for most strikes thrown in a UFC title fight from 130 to 60. So Woodley is on the shit list, and the shit list is Dana White's shit list. And Woodley was said by Dana White to be fighting George St. Pierre in November at MSG, and Dana White said, look, no one wants to see this guy fight. He's not entertaining, he doesn't go after it, and it's not a fight that excites anyone, Woodley versus GSP. He said the same thing about Bisping versus GSP. This isn't a fight that excites anyone, the ship has sailed. Well, here we are. Woodley outdid himself in a fight versus GSP. That fight is off. Bisping versus GSP is on, which, as everyone knows, is music to my ears. This is a fight I really wanted when it was first released. I was so elated, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be a great fight between two longtime veterans. But back to Tyron Woodley. After a performance like that, in which Woodley fought so lackadaisical and so boring and just did not go after it, for the second time in a row, we'll say, fight versus Wonderboy at UFC 209 was not the most entertaining, to say the least. And Woodley fought very similarly to that, backing up constantly, moving side to side, trying to be sly, trying to be slick, when he wasn't even doing anything. So who is next for Woodley? There's a fighter by the name of Robbie Lawler that fought. Dana White seems to think that that's the next matchup. The welterweight division is very shallow right now due to the fact that you got some guys with questionable, statuses in their career. Guys like Carlos Condit. Obviously, he's not going to fight Wonderboy again. They fought twice. Obviously, he maybe, depending on who wins that, if Jorge Masvidal is the winner, they could finally do the Woodley versus Masvidal fight, which would be a barn burner. Excuse me. Or if Dana White really wants to get creative, post Mayweather-McGregor, McGregor could fight Woodley for a third belt. That is also a possibility. But realistically, I really don't care. I'm a diehard UFC fan. I'm a diehard MMA fan. I write about mixed martial arts daily. And I cannot stand the way Tyron Woodley fights. There is no fighter with more athletic talent, more raw power, more potential physically than Tyron Woodley in that division, and yet he fights scared. He fights only to win rather than trying to finish the guy. My goal as a wrestler, my goal as a baseball player, my goal as a football player, my goal as an athlete was to do as little as possible for the best result. And really give it your all, though, in doing so. And Woodley did not. My goal was to finish, whether it's in wrestling, whether it's catching a pass, making a tackle, in football, just in any sport. My goal was to finish. And Woodley could have finished Maia once, maybe twice, and he did not. On the other side of the coin, I felt really bad for Demian Maia. Here's a guy that's been in the UFC for over a decade, finally gets his title shot after a 7-fight win streak, gets inadvertently poked in the eye. Maia said it was an uppercut. I thought I saw the fingers in Maia's eyes from Woodley. And realistically, Maia could easily retire, but post-fight, he disagreed and said that he's not going to. That he's still going to keep pushing. God bless him. He has done a lot for the sport of MMA, more than what will ever be known. So it was bittersweet. I mean, I'm not enamored with Tyron Woodley. It's no secret. The guy blocked me on Twitter because I posted my scorecard saying that Wonder Boy won. He still blocked me. And that was that. I don't know how this guy makes the welterweight division more exciting, but I can thank him because he gave me the fight that I wanted all along in Bisping versus St. Pierre. Bisping's the British mouthpiece, the brash Brit. GSP is the French-Canadian superstar. It is a perfect fight at the later half of both fighters' careers. And Tyron Woodley really didn't deserve that matchup with how he, quote-unquote, fights. So, that was my take on the Woodley situation. Who knows who he will fight? Could easily be Robbie Lawler. Could be somebody else. But was anyone really enamored with that fight? No. Not at all. And Maia was trying to push the pace, and Woodley was just backpedaling, moving side to side, not really trying to finish. Comes into the press conference with all these statistics of what he's done in his career versus other fighters. It's like, you haven't been around that long. You won the belt, maybe a little over a year. Actually, a year ago today, he won the belt. So, you've defended your belt against Wonder Boy, which I thought you lost that fight. You defended your belt against Masvidal yesterday. Or against Maia yesterday, I'm sorry. So, he's just not, he doesn't conduct himself well, and everyone's saying Dana White's throwing him under the bus. In actuality, I disagree with that, and most of the time I do agree on topics that involve Dana White being kind of a doucher, but in this situation, I don't. Woodley fought very crappy, it was very boring, and it was supposed to be an entertaining fight. That's it. Instead, he's fighting to win. It's like, come to entertain a little bit. That was not entertaining whatsoever. So, I think Woodley will get Lawler next, or maybe Masvidal, if Masvidal beats Wonder Boy, or maybe we could see another Wonder Boy fight. Who knows, but Woodley's era inside the welterweight division is nowhere near as exciting as it was when GSP was running the show there at that weight. So, never say never. We'll see. But tune in to part 3 of the Thomas Take Sports podcast. I'm going to be talking about John Gruden's possible return. Right now, I want to parlay this into Cyborg versus Evinger. And I want to dedicate, the last 5 minutes of this part to that fight. And it's really tough for me to dedicate 15 minutes to that fight because of the fact that it was so one-sided. And it was so long overdue that Cyborg was the UFC champion. I'd wanted her in the UFC for a long time. She retired Gina Carano, who was the face of women's MMA. I believe she still is, regardless of what's happened since. She brought women's MMA to the limelight. Gina Carano. Nobody else. And she's a terror. Cyborg is a terror. And Tanya Evinger had virtually no chance in that fight. I hate to say it, but she hangs tough in there. She did her best. But Cyborg is the real deal for a reason. I think she's top 5 pound for pound. And I would love to see her fight Holly Holm. That's a super fight right there in itself. So, make it happen. That's my motto. Take care, guys. That was the Thomas Take, UFC 214 Aftermath, Woodley versus Maia. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Cyborg, the next part coming right up, and some football stuff. Take care.